today we're going to talk about how the food industry hijacked our biology to get us to eat more food. And this information is coming from Hooked by Michael Moss. I just finished reading this book, and it was so insightful and so powerful in terms of just illustrating how the food companies know what we crave, what that we want low price, that we want convenience, we want to save time, we love variety. And they use all of these things and sell them back to us. But we know now that, processed foods are affecting our health. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm not saying that processed foods are not tasty, because they are. I personally love chocolate. I love chips. I love ice cream, even though I haven't had any lately. But processed foods taste good. But we do have a problem where a lot of us, most of the food that we are consuming is processed or ultra processed. And this is just leading to us having more weight, leading to metabolic diseases like diabetes. We can have high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And then the biggest thing too is that I feel that nobody wants to be unhealthy. I feel like most of us want to be healthy, and we want to live longer and be energized and not have to be, visiting the doctor with all these ailments. But the thing is that we're kind of hooked on the idea that with food, it's all about willpower. And we don't really give any thought to how the food industry has done a ton of research studies and has put a bunch of, money into the development of their food products to get us to eat more of food. And then another thing that I've kind of been thinking about is that a lot of these foods, which this really helps me to try to mitigate my eating of ultra processed foods, is that most of these foods are not foods. They are these ingredients that have been extracted, have been put together, and have been coated with artificial flavors, artificial colors, preservatives, emulsifiers to make them taste good. Because if they didn't have all these added ingredients, they wouldn't taste good. They would be so nasty. Because, if you taste these ingredients individually, if you taste a preservative, it's probably not going to taste good. So the food companies know that. That's also why they add sugar and salt and fat to our foods to keep us hooked. So I'm going to talk about how the food companies hacked our biology. They know that we like to save time. They know we like a good price. They know we like variety. And they know that we love sugar. So let's start with sugar. So according to Michael Moss, there's about 60 different type of sugars that the food industry uses in the food products. Not only that, but they add sugar to foods that don't necessarily need sugar. So this creates a sense in us that everything that we eat needs to be sweet. And it makes it harder for us to not only stop consuming the food that is sweet, but if you want to start consuming foods that aren't that sweet. So let's think about vegetables, or let's think about broccoli. Think about you eating a broccoli. It kind of makes you feel I know some people love vegetables, and I like vegetables, but even broccoli makes me feel it's kind of earthy, but I know it's good for me. But it's not a cookie, right? Kind of a cookie gives you sort of a high, and broccoli doesn't. And one of the reasons why that may be is because our foods that shouldn't really have sugar have sugar. And this creates the sense that everything that we eat needs to have sugar. So think about bread. Bread has sugar. Think about tomato sauce. Tomato sauce has added sugar. It doesn't need it really. And think about yogurt. So yogurt is a health food, right? It's a probiotic, type of food. And it's supposed to be good for us, but there's a ton of food companies that add a ton of sugar into their yogurt. And then the sugar in the yogurt not only makes you want to eat more of that yogurt, but it kind of predisposes your taste buds to want more sugar. So, I mean, it's good for the food industry because then we're going to want to buy more other food products or try the different flavors that they give us. But ultimately, we just end up being more hooked on sugar. And then the food industry, I know they could say like, well, we give you the nutrition label. And in the nutrition label, we tell you how many grams of sugar are in your food product. But you and I both know that nutrition food label, one, is not that easy to read. And it's very interesting because through this book, I found out that the food industry actually had a say in the development of the nutrition label. Isn't that like a conflict of interest? So when people became more concerned about what was in the food, I believe it was like a VP of Monsanto that proposed or was okay with or was going along with the idea of providing more information about food on a packet. And then the FDA went on to develop the nutrition food label with the assistance of the food industry. And then we go to today, and the nutrition food label is basically not that useful because you kind of have to really study in order to know like what it means, and only 1 out of 3 consumers actually use it. But going back to sugar, even if you were to see in the label you look at, it says sugar, it gives you grams, and it gives you an amount per serving. So let's say it gave you like 24 grams of sugar in yogurt, you really don't know what to do with that information. And the food companies know that. So that's, I feel kind of like why they say like, well, we're giving you the information and the nutrition food label, but they know that most of us don't know what to do with that, because even right now, if I say yogurt has 24 grams of sugar, some of you guys who know might know that that's too much. 4 grams of sugar equals about a teaspoon of sugar. So that's about 6 teaspoons. It's a lot, right? But most people don't know that. The other thing with going back to food industry, using about 60 different types of sugar in our food. Not only is that a lot, and I know they're not using it at the same time. Sometimes I know they use like 3 or 5. But the other part as consumers is that just makes it hard for you or me or us to know if our food product has sugar or not. Because when you look at the ingredient list, which is where you would find this information, sometimes when you read it, you don't recognize the name of the ingredient as sugar when it actually is sugar. So we all know about high fructose corn syrup, right? That's kind of like very popular, and we all know we should avoid it. But there's also other names for sugar like maltodextrin or dextrin. That's also a name for sugar. And then my favorite is fruit juice concentrate. So fruit juice concentrate is very, for me personally, I don't know how you guys feel, but it's very confusing because it has the word fruit juice. So you might think fruit juice and you think about fruit and you think that's like a whole food and you think that's healthy, but actually that just means sugar. There's sugar in your food, and the food companies know this. So that's number one, how hooked this book pointed out that the food industry hijacked our biology to get us to eat more of their food. And just kind of like side note, or sort of like my thoughts on the sugar being added to a ton of food and that making us crave more sugar. I kind of just wanted to say something on like willpower, because I know a lot of people struggle with food. Like I've struggled with food and, like letting go of the foods that I love. Like I can tell you guys, Cheez-Its were my favorite growing up, Sunny Delight, and my sister and I used to do missions to Jack in the Box, which was right across from where we lived, to buy a strawberry shake. So, I can see like why like it's hard to leave the foods, but the fact that so much of our foods have sugar added to them that one isn't necessary and two we don't know about. So 75% of the food in the grocery store is processed, which means it's when a food is processed, it's going to have added sugars. So we don't need this. And again, you might not know about it, and then it's making it way harder for you to stop consuming the sugar or that food product that you love, whether it's like soda, whether it's like ice cream, whether it's like a Twinkie. I don't even know if they sell Twinkies anymore, but whatever it is, it makes it harder. And then you feel it's your fault because you're like, I should be able to stop eating this food. It's my lack of willpower. But one thing that this book was so good about, and I felt really great about reading, and I hope other people read it too, is the fact that no, it's not just your willpower. When you have all these other inputs coming at you, when you are consuming a food that's like triggering, whether it triggers like dopamine or it triggers this sense of like you feeling good and then you wanting more of that sugar, I mean, that just makes willpower way harder. So don't buy so much into willpower. I mean, there is a part of that. There's a part of accountability and responsibility and like knowledge and all of that. But understand the other side of it. Understand the side that the food industry is playing. Don't just put it all on yourself in terms of willpower. But hopefully once you know this information, it kind of makes you feel a little bit better and eases maybe the stress that you put on yourself or the guilt that you put on yourself for it being harder for you to stop eating these foods. Because it's not just you. But once you know this, you can do a couple of things to get you off of, the sugar or off of consuming these foods that are just kind of making it harder for you to stop eating sugar. Okay, and number two, numero dos, these companies, food companies or the food industry, they know that we love variety. So they've done a lot of research where they've seen that if you consume the same food or like it looks the same, like if I'm just like eating chicken or like broccoli and it's like the same shape, the same color, I'm gonna get a signal in my brain that I'm full because our body just, I don't know, like you become full. Like they study this in research according to the book. There was even a research study that was done with M&Ms, and they gave a group of people 6 different colors of M&Ms and the other group of people 10 different colors of M&Ms, and the people who had the 10 different colors of M&Ms ate more M&Ms because the idea that there was like variety just, I guess, like increased somebody's, I don't know if it was the appetite or they just like ate more of it. So the food industry knows this. So what do? They give us a variety of food, but in my opinion, it's kind of like perception of variety. So kind of think about chips, like potato chips. I love potato chips. You have like, barbecue potato chips. You have salt and vinegar potato chips. You can have like the fuego, the spicy potato chips. I'm thinking about my favorite brand and all the different flavors they have. And it can have like 10 different flavors. So I think about ice cream. There's like 10 different flavors like of ice cream, even like weird flavors, cotton candy, something, and, or cereal. Cereal is like a better example. There's the Captain Crunch, there's Kix, there's the Honey Nut cereal. There's like a ton, and we feel like there's like variety and there's like different colors like in the cereal, and like all of that triggers us to eat more food. The fact that, it looks different, but also when you go to the grocery store, you don't get bored of like the same, like one cereal. They give you a cereal and like a ton of different varieties. So that's what kind of makes us like eat more. Another thing that was really interesting that the book pointed out is that whenever we are watching TV or we're like on our phone and like, let's say you're eating or whatever, you're looking at your plate and then you look at the TV and then you look back at your plate, just going from screen to plate, every time you look at your plate, your mind thinks that it's a different food. Like it looks different to the mind. So then that causes you to eat more. So that's why when you are on a phone or you're like watching TV, you could kind of like eat faster or like finish your food without even noticing. So that's also maybe why, like, if you're working and you have a bag of potato chips, I keep bringing up potato chips, but if you have a bag of like potato chips and before you know it, that bag of potato chips is gone, that can be because like the mind is not even like recognizing or it just sees it as different. Another very interesting thing that the book pointed out is that whenever we are on the TV or on the phone, it actually elongates the amount of time that it takes our body or our brain to get the message that we are full. So that can be like another reason why we can eat more whenever we are like distracted, watching TV or on the phone. But kind of going back to variety, the grocery stores used to have about like 6,000 different food products in the grocery store. And we fast forward to today, they have around 33,000 different food items. Now, this doesn't mean that we have 33,000 different foods, but we have like the same but different a variation of something. So we talked about cereals, we talked about ice cream, we talked about the chips. And in my opinion, like when I look at that, it's just so crazy because it's like a false variety, or like it's not, to me, it's like not real, because something can be chocolate, something can be vanilla, but it's the same thing. You just kind of coated it with a different, flavoring, but it makes us feel like, we're getting variety. Another big win that the book pointed out was the variety pack, and that they made kind of the package smaller so you can like snack more, and they gave you a variety. So the one thing that I think about is chips. So I don't know if you guys ever bought the box of chips that had the Fritos, and it had the regular Lay's, and then it had the Doritos, the regular Doritos, and then the blue bag Doritos, and then it had Funyuns, and then it had hot Cheetos, and then the regular Cheetos, and it was this bag or this box, and that was just variety. So that's one of the big things that they did. They made you feel like there was variety because they gave you different chips. So you could have gone, maybe at 2 p.m. and got like the Cheetos, and then maybe at 6 p.m. you come and you get the Doritos, and they're different in your mind. But this is one of the ways that the food industry saw that we just consume more when we have more variety. And the other very interesting thing they did to hijack our biology is lower their price. So they know that we like, I don't know if it's either a deal or we just don't like to spend a lot or we like to save, but they know that if their food costs less, then we will buy more of it. So what I found really interesting is that the number one thing that the food industry is always trying to do is they're always trying to lower their cost. So then they can then lower our cost, and then they can increase their profits because we're going to buy more of it. But by them lowering their costs, what this means is that they do a lot of like research in order to figure out how to decrease the cost of a certain ingredient. And one of the ways to decrease the cost of that ingredient is to make a compound, like a chemical or a food lab made ingredient, which is not like a natural ingredient. It's like artificial, that tastes the same as whatever ingredient they're trying to replace. So I'll give you an example, or two examples. So one of them is with pumpkin spice. So the book makes a comment about how, Starbucks really made the craze for like pumpkin spice, and then the food industry followed by giving us everything pumpkin spice, pumpkin spice latte, pumpkin spice pie. I don't know. I don't have pumpkin spice, so I don't know. But I know that there's like a ton, like pumpkin spice. I already said latte, so pumpkin spice coffee. Anyways, so for those of you guys who cook and who know, that pumpkin spice is made from other spices like, I believe, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and maybe ginger. But the pumpkin spice that's added into our food products is actually made up of 80 different ingredients, or 80 different chemical compounds made in a lab, kind of put together by somebody in a lab coat, mixing together like these different chemicals in order to get the same aroma or the same sensation that actual pumpkin spice gives us. And the food companies don't have to disclose all of the different chemical compounds they use to make this pumpkin spice. Again, there's 80 different one of them according to the book. But all they have to do is write it out as natural or artificial flavors in the ingredient list. So you might read that and you might think like, okay, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I always I never know what that means. But like now I know. It's just whatever other chemical or compound or artificial whatever they used and they put it in the food product, which was so eye-opening because I usually tell people like try to buy a food product that has 10 or less ingredients. But if you see this like natural or artificial flavors in the ingredient list, that potentially can mean like 80 other, ingredients that we don't know about. So they do this to cut cost. And you might be thinking like, well, what's the problem, right? Because maybe you love pumpkin spice and you're like, well, what's the big deal? Well, on one side, like these ingredients are tested and are allowed to be in our food as long as they don't cause us to die, as long as they're not toxic enough for us to like drop dead, right? Because that's not good for business. It's not good for the companies, and obviously it's not good for us. So these food ingredients are tested for that, but they're not tested for how they affect our metabolism. So we have so many people struggling with weight currently, struggling with letting go of these foods, and we don't really know how these ingredients, again, affect us, if they affect your blood sugar balance, if they affect your affinity for sugar, if they just mess with things. So we just don't know, because I think we were not made to consume these chemical compounds. And my problem with them is that we don't know how they affect our health. So like I see a whole bunch of people who are struggling with like diabetes or pre-diabetes, or they're, just eating healthy, and they go to the grocery store and they're faced with all this variety and all these products and, cheap prices or lower prices. And they might purchase something, but that's something, maybe the thing hindering their progress in their health, and they don't know it. And it's very frustrating, and they think that it's them, but it's actually like the food product that you're consuming. So that's kind of my problem, I guess, with these ingredients. But very interesting to learn about these flavor houses that are the ones that create these different flavors to mimic natural flavors. Another good example is vanilla. So vanilla is super expensive at about, I think the book said like $272 per pound, but the synthetic chemical version of vanilla is only $7 per pound. So that's the one that they're using in our food products, because it's cheaper. But again, we just don't know how that compound or that chemical affects our metabolic health. I'm not even talking about like, some people talk about other stuff like cancer and all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking metabolically. Like we don't know how these chemicals affect. The other thing about price, that these food companies, work to lower the price so then we can get things at a very cheaper price. There's a lot to that, right? Because if I tell somebody like, oh, just like eat, whole foods, for some individuals, like I'm aware that it's difficult to purchase like a $5, pint of blueberries versus purchasing a $5, frozen pizza that they can possibly feed their whole family with. So I do struggle with that, because some people don't really have a choice. There's some individuals who are blessed and they have more, financial ability. They have more income that they can choose, and some people don't. I kind of think about like when I was growing up and, my mom having a certain amount of money to feed like a family of 6, right? I grew up with a lot of those foods. They're more economical, right? Which I think is such a conversation and such a debate because I don't know. Then I think about like myself and my family, right? Like because those at the time were the foods that, we thought we can like afford. Not that we were poor or anything like that, but that's kind of like what we bought. But then that like affects your health, affects your weight. And then that can make it harder for you to work, harder for you to learn at school. And then that like overall lowers your income in the future, right? So it's kind of like this cycle. And I don't know, I'm so like torn by it because even these governmental programs, like, whether it's like SNAP or, I'm blanking on the other one, but I'll write it on the screen. These programs that are supposed to give, I'm sorry, WIC is the one I was thinking about, women, infant, and children. They're supposed to help like lower income families have more access to healthier food. But when you look at their choices, because I did sort of like an internship when I was getting my dietitian credential, doing my hours for that. And like these cereals and these juices, and like they just have so much sugar. And I'm like, where in the world, where did it go wrong? And I can kind of guess where, went wrong, but like, why? That is not helping anyone. So that kind of makes me a little upset because people are unsuspecting, because I was unsuspecting when I was younger and I didn't know the effect that this has. But from going to that to then working at a clinic and seeing how someone with like a grandma with diabetes ends up getting kidney disease and ends up like, needing dialysis, and how the whole family suffers, and like how all of this is preventable with food, but we either have lack of knowledge or, again, the financial status also doesn't help. But these food companies, I don't know, I just think it's very responsible from the food companies to offer these foods. I'm not for, I don't know, I believe in like freedoms and all that stuff, but I hope that maybe like books like this and having conversations like these, if you're that person that there's always somebody in the family who's going to go and tell the other family about food and changing the habits. And, there's always somebody who's like, fighting that fight. And, maybe you feel alone in that, but just know that it does make a difference. When you change like what you eat for your health and, happiness and all of that. Anyways, I totally digressed. So that was on price, how the food companies know that we love a good price. So if you're able to, I don't know, just kind of try to think about that, how everything is designed for us to want to purchase these foods from, the variety that they give us, from the sugar that is added, from the low cost. And then the last thing is the convenience of these foods. So one of the biggest opportunities that the food companies had was when women went from being like housewives and not working to joining the workforce. So from the 1950s, only about 37% of women were working. Fast forward to today, and about 80% of women are working, which is a good thing, right? Like I like working and it's cool to be able to do that. But the reality is that when we shifted from being in the home to working, we no longer had time to prep what we were going to eat for the week, or prep a grocery list, figure that out. And even like cook became so difficult to like cook the meals at home or spend the morning, with kids having breakfast. All of that time was kind of taken because it's now spent driving to work, or just going to work and being at work. And in the 1950s, when the shift was starting to happen, in the 60s and the 70s, the food companies knew this and saw it as an opportunity to happily take over that responsibility of what to feed the family. And women trusted in the food companies. And I kind of, obviously I wasn't there in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s when this happened, but I can kind of imagine that time where women were cooking at home, and ingredients were, I would imagine, more wholesome, more whole food based, and there was more of that, right? And then you shift into purchasing your food from the food companies, from like the food industry and at the grocery store. And maybe at that time when it first started, the food that you were purchasing was more whole foods, right? But we fast forward to today, and some of that food that we purchase isn't even really food. Again, it has like a bunch of like preservatives and chemicals, artificial food coloring, artificial food flavors that aren't good for us. But that was like one shift that happened. And again, it is hard. It is hard to cook at home. It is hard to plan a list. I think that, I don't know. I feel like we put a lot of blame on ourselves, but it is a difficult thing to do. And my point is that food companies know that. So they'll sell you the solution, but just kind of remember what you are giving up, because you could be giving up, kind of the health of your family. Again, I know some women, families, like, you have to work and that's just the way that it is. But, trying to choose better options as much as you can. But this is by design, because I almost feel guilty saying that, because you might be like, well, I don't have time, right? Like, you don't know my schedule. Like, I don't have time. And I respect that. But on the other hand, I wish food companies would just give us better food. Like, why are they giving us like all this food that is just like cheap ingredients, and not even like cheap ingredients or feeling like, other ingredients are better. But what I'm saying is that these foods can actually hurt our health, whether it's like diabetes or weight or, cholesterol, or high blood pressure, and that causes more issues. So I don't know. I kind of wish like food companies were more responsible in that sense, and gave us better food. Food companies even go to the extent of studying how they package their food. So these like little bags that we just kind of like rip open and we snack out of, like, all of that has been created. So it's just easier for us to eat, and easier for us to like keep eating more, and easier for us to purchase more of their foods. So when you think about everything that you kind of have going on with food, whether it's hard for you to quit one of your favorite foods, whether it's difficult for you to lose weight, whether it's hard for you to go, grocery shopping and you end up buying these prepackaged, ready to eat meals, like, a lot of it is not, I guess kind of like your fault. It's kind of by design. Like, food companies know exactly what they are selling us. They know exactly how to market these foods. They know exactly how to make them more convenient for us to consume. They know exactly how to lower their price so we can either, one, afford them or afford more of them. So check out Hooked by Michael Moss to just learn more about this, and I hope it helps you in your journey to feeling and becoming healthier. Thanks for watching.